The shooting on September 16th at the Navy Yard, and the perpetrator in this case, Aaron Alexis, and how he kind of got through the system, kind of stuck through the system without being recognized for his background. Now, Pete, just to briefly give you, what this guy was about. I mean, military guy, and I know that you're going to speak a little bit about, some of the themes with some of the military people being involved as active shooters. But in 2004, arrested for malicious mischief in Seattle, Washington. 2008, disorderly conduct in Atlanta, Georgia. 2010, reckless discharge of a firearm in Fort Worth, Texas. 2011, he's honorably discharged from the service, but he had instances of insubordination, disorderly conduct, absenteeism, drunkenness, and just right before, a month before the shootings, in August of 13, he's reported to be paranoid, hearing voices from the ceiling through a microwave, that he's being followed, and he was treated for mental illness at the VA. What's going on?
Well, you threw out a lot there, Mike,
Yeah.
so I don't know exactly where to start, but I'll talk about the thing that was most obvious to me is patterns. I teach for the Department of Justice. I was down in South Carolina doing some training when the shooting took place, and initially the reports came out that there was no warning signs about his prior behavior, and you saw and we digested it together, the NYPD active shooting scenario. I know from my 25 years managing jail facilities and watching MOs or modus operandi of people, I said, I find that very hard to believe, because that would be the exception, not the rule, and I knew that they'd come out with some prior history with Aaron Alexis, not realizing that it would be this extensive and this recent, as much in New England when they made a call when he got pulled over for hearing voices. You threw out first his honorable discharge.
Yes.
Based on what I've seen, I find it hard to believe that he got the honorable discharge, that somebody didn't draw a red flag there and give him a less than honorable discharge. It might have prevented his government clearance. I see a relationship to the military with some of these events. I point out that Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot President Kennedy, was a Marine, learned his sniper skills
Yes.
in the Corps. Timothy McVeigh, who ignited the federal building in Oklahoma, a veteran of the U.S. service. Aaron Alexis, now a veteran of the U.S. Census, and then we saw the shooting in Texas with the major, who was also a military veteran. So you can't ignore that there may be some correlation between anti-government activities and the relationship with the military, or the military training, or perhaps some evaluation of what was going on in the military.
Yeah, I mean, it's the trend, you bring up a very important point and a very significant observation, is that there is this correlation between, and of course we're not talking about the majority of military men and women, but there is a definitive correlation between military service, and we're training these folks how to use firearms proficiently. And now, arguably, some of these instances could have been prevented if we did our due diligence, if we did the background checks to the point that they should have been done. Now, the company that did the background check on Alexis, USIS, is now under investigation by OPM.
Yeah, and that's the same company that did the background check on Snowden, who leaked the sensitive government information as well.
Yeah, and it's just disturbing. I mean, we're also a private investigative firm, so we rely heavily on these databases so that we could identify, somebody's past.
Right. Well, it's fortunate that we understand the ins and outs of background checks. I'm not sure that John Q. Public understands the way a background check is done. It's not as simple as I want to check out Mike Blanchard 40, so I put his name into the computer and see what comes back. It relies on your social security number. It relies on you providing accurate information on where you lived previously. It relies on things getting into a database in a timely fashion. It relies in some cases on a conviction as opposed to an arrest. And it relies on the reliability of the company that you're using and how extensive they go. The best way to do a background check on somebody is to manually check every state and every county to
Yes.
and check records to see if there's things that haven't been entered in computers yet or haven't been correlated.
Yes.
But that's not going to get done.
No, definitely not. But
So then we rely on technology and relying on the individual counties to enter this information into the NCIC database.
right. And now there's two components here. And when we look at the profile of the active shooter, and we've done some thorough analysis and we've done some commentary in past episodes of Get Secure. But don't we see two common themes? One is the criminal side of it, which you and I were just discussing. But the second one, and I know you talk extensively on profiling and psychological profiling, we're also seeing, and not just in these military veterans and people that commit these shootings, but we're also seeing a history of psychological. If you go back to Virginia Tech and you look at Cho, if you go back to Klebold and Harris and Columbine, if you go to the Colorado shooting in Aurora,
Town
and
Mass.
yeah, you see seeing this constant pattern of not just criminality, but of psychological elements that these people have more of a propensity to commit such a heinous act.
Yeah, and I'll throw something out about criminal behavior and mental health, mental illness. A lot of people don't realize that the majority of people incarcerated are on some type of mental health psychotropic medication to control their behavior. So there's a strong correlation between mental health and criminal activity, no great surprise there. But it also is indicative of that there's warning signs coming down the pike that people can say, hey, listen, there's an issue here, and try to address it before it turns into something like this. And was Aaron Alexis crying out for help and looking to get stopped or caught or addressed? Apparently he knocked on the door of 2 VA hospitals. Certainly the clinicians wouldn't make, or the administrators there couldn't make a correlation right away with, hey, listen, this is so time critical that we need to address this now, because there's hundreds and literally thousands of servicemen and women that have the same type of issues. And I'm not saying that, but what we call in law enforcement connecting the dots, when you look at all the dots collectively, and everyone didn't know the other dots, it portrays a picture of something that could have been stopped.
Right, and that's the point that I was trying to get to, is that the system's failing us, Pete. The system's failing us. I don't think 2 weeks have gone by on this show that we haven't had another active shooter scenario in St. Louis. The disgruntled guy that walked into his place of business and killed people.
Well, Mike, you were with us when we did the presentation at Dowling College on active shooting about 3 months ago, and during the presentation I said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and certainly that prophecy fulfilled itself, and I believe this trend is going to continue.
Yeah. Now we've read, oh my gosh, there's so many commentaries in the newspapers, in the media, about that we could have done something to stop this. When are we gonna get it right? Because right now we're not getting it right. And we could say, all we want, that, we're doing everything we can. It's not just a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But when can we start reducing the when part?
Well, it's difficult. I don't like to be a Monday morning quarterback. And I like to, you're talking in general terms, I like to be specific. So we're talking about Aaron Alexis. Without a doubt, the information that they got on the military base a week before the shooting, when he got pulled over, they was hearing voices, never got to where it needed to get. So that one critical piece, irregardless of all the other information, could have stopped this event, because they would have denied him access. Does that mean that he wouldn't have shot up a subway car or done something differently? Perhaps, but it would have stopped that event at the Navy Yard. So I like to look at things individually. I wouldn't say systemically the system is failing, because there are a lot of good intelligence collection avenues, and it's getting better every day. Much like with 9/11, they say the system failed, and as a result, the Department of Homeland Security emerged as a collection base of law enforcement information. In law enforcement, a lot of agencies are silos or fragmented, and they don't talk collectively and cohesively together. So there's plenty of room for a government database that can do a better job of collecting all this information, a requirement by counties to enter it within real time, maybe clear parameters of 30 to 90 days after arrest. And certainly in this age of technology, if we can do everything else with technology, we can certainly do a little bit better job. But I think the tools are there. I think communication needs to get better, and law enforcement needs to talk and have protocols for us to share information a little bit better.
I mean, you and I were both in law enforcement. Myself, a retired detective squad commander. Yourself as a chief in the Department of Corrections for the city, and we've kind of seen how things have changed since 9/11. You know, pre 9/11, we've certainly gotten better on the terrorism front. We've certainly gotten better with information sharing in both the public and private sector. Information sharing, and and God bless the law enforcement agencies on the state, local, federal level.
And if I could just stop you there for a second, Mike, one of the things I'd like to applaud is the first responder response to that incident. There's no doubt in my mind that they prevented additional loss of life by their quick and tactical response. Law enforcement agencies around the country have been training more germane to respond to these types of incidents. I think Columbine was one of the first ones that caught the country off guard, thinking that schools were a target, the lambs, the defenseless, so to speak, and law enforcement has done a better job to respond to these types of incidents, and I think they did an exceptional job in Washington.
Absolutely, and no, we have to commend people that are doing the good jobs, but I believe that, like I was saying before, that communication has gotten better with information sharing in law enforcement. We could only do so much on the terrorism front, but you have the terrorism front, and now we move to background checks with, to obtain a firearm. We're looking at the two components, both criminal background and psychological screening. We saw with Joe in Virginia Tech, history of psychological illness, how to get his hands on firearms. We've brought up the Newtown tragedy in Connecticut several times on Get Secure.
But my medical databases don't talk to the firearm databases, so generally this information is self-provided. They'll ask you, do you have any history of mental health? And you check no, and they move on. They don't ask you for physician records. They wouldn't know which physician or clinician to ask those records from. So in that regard, it's very difficult to determine somebody's mental history when they're applying for a gun license. That's why we rely so heavily on the criminal history, hoping that the mental history rose to the level, to stop somebody, that it resulted or culminated in an arrest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we could rely on the clinicians to report that, their patients. You have, the HIPAA laws and the things that they're, but there are, when somebody's exhibiting psychotic behavior, it's well within the psychiatrist's ability to commit somebody to a mental institution. Yes. And maybe that's a last resort, and we're not going to critique what the clinicians are doing, what the psychiatrists are doing. But Commissioner Dormer, former Suffolk County Police Commissioner, has been on this show, and he's always talking about the theme that came out of the MTA: if you see something, say something.
Absolutely.
And again, we're not just talking about crime and reporting crime, but we're also talking about what's happening psychologically with somebody. Could a family member, a friend, have identified that somebody that they're related to or somebody that they know closely is exhibiting, behavior that, you have suicidal ideology? And what do we see oftentimes in an active shooter situation? Not only that they have no regard for human life, but they have no regard for their own life.
Yep.
So a lot of them end with them taking their own life. So if you see something, say something. I think, Pete, maybe you could comment on this. There's a hesitancy for a friend, a close friend, or a family member to come forward and report to authorities that their loved one or a good friend is exhibiting this type of behavior. I'd like you to just comment on that.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's getting better, Mike. It takes, unfortunately, incidents like this to profile that there are things that happen along the way that could rise to, to the level of alerting somebody in this regard. I saw a news account of that the shooter was involved in a verbal altercation with the husband and wife over a vehicle-related incident 2 weeks before the shooting. Again, these people are dropping hints that they're not stable and not productive members of society, and I think if we pay attention, like you said, to what's going on, we might be able to avoid some of these in the future. And then if you can't, then I just point to one of the things that we know and do best is the physical security at the Navy Yard. I don't think by any argument that anyone felt that it couldn't have been fortified better. They had a pretty light workforce for the amount of contractors and the sensitivity of the work that went on there. So from a physical security perspective, I think there's more that definitely could have been done to what we call harden the target or make it more inaccessible for people like Alexis.
Yeah, and that's the disturbing fact is that he got credentialed. He had the government ID card as a contractor. He had free access to go in.
Well, a metal detector, Mike, a simple metal detector at the front entrance, a wand, something would have prevented the firearm from coming into the building. Doesn't mean there would have been a confrontation at the portal of the building, but it means that the persons inside would have been better protected with an additional layer of security like that. Certainly, when we travel on an airplane, we go through these type of devices, and you can't smuggle a shotgun or a handgun onto the plane. So if the same type of devices were employed there, and the argument is, hey, listen, people have to go through the metal detector, it's going to slow down the work production there at the Navy Yard, but it's done successfully in a lot of other places at the airport. Just went out of LaGuardia Airport, thousands of people in the morning went through the metal detector without an issue. So, people custom tailor their lives. They'll come in clear plastic bags. They'll leave metal things at home. They'll wear different shoes, different clothing. It's not going to set the machine off. So, unfortunately, in our society, these are some of the things we have to talk about and think about is enhancing the physical protection.
Yeah, and it's every day. There's an emerging story right now out of Kenya. There's a mall shooting, and innocent victims are being killed. There's also a hostage situation, from what I understand as of right now. I mean, it's happening, not just here in the United States, but it's also happening abroad. And again, there's not much, Pete, that we try to be as best prepared as we possibly can, but there's so many things going on both locally, nationally, and globally right now that I think that I believe we can continue to get better. We continue to learn, but I'd like to see more things put in place to keep, and it also shows like this. It's also law enforcement professionals getting the word out. We had in previous episodes at Get Secure tips about staying calm in an emergency, staying calm if there is an active, and it's very difficult. It's easy to say, oh, stay calm when somebody's shooting, but if we practice it, like what's being done in schools right now, these tabletop exercises so that people know what their individual roles are in the event of emergency.
Right, it's called run, hide, and fight, which is similar to years ago, stop, drop, and roll. So now what children are being taught to run, hide, and fight in the school situation, and you wouldn't have to think 20 years ago that your children would be a target in school, but because of the fact that they're easy targets, because they're public places, this is where shooters are trying to go.
Right, and it's unfortunate that in today's society, that's where we are. But it shows like this. It's and law enforcement professionals, if you're out there, volunteer your time. I sit on a school safety board at my daughter's school, and I give my experience. I give my experience from the police department, everything that I've learned from doing these tabletop exercises, from knowing about active shooter, from knowing about criminal profiling, things that administrators need to look for, teachers need to look for, business owners need to look for, mall managers need to look for, because this is where the active disgruntled employees, Pete, you've done lectures on workplace violence and identifying, because workplace violence, as we know, could turn into active shooter. So it's getting the word out, and again, law enforcement professionals, educators, try to volunteer some of your time so that we can really become a safer community locally, nationally, globally. Because the efforts that are being put forth are commendable and are fantastic. I believe we can get better. Pete, thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks, Mike, and I'd just like to offer again, our security offers a free consultation to anyone looking for it. We're putting together a free presentation now on security for a school up in Yonkers. We just did a school in Uniondale. So we just did a business, someone's concerned with employee theft, and they believe that the employees are involved in gang activity. So for any potential business or even for private, we're available. I mean, we're passionate about what we do. We're willing to speak to anybody, come see your place, and offer a hand wherever we can, and there's no charge for the initial consultation.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm talking about, getting the word out, using our experience, using what we come to the table with to try to help, all the folks out there to stay safe in an emergency, to stay calm in an emergency, to do a good site survey, and to show people how to protect themselves. So Pete, thanks again.
Thanks,
for coming
Mike.
on.
Get Arrow, get secure.
And again, I'm Mike Blangiforti. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Get Secure. We'll see you next week, but at a special new time, because we have a special guest. Next week, we're at 4 p.m. instead of 10 a.m. That's 4 p.m. instead of 10 a.m., and we'll be welcoming former Suffolk County Executive Steve Levy to Get Secure, to talk about politics, to talk about Syria and other issues affecting us on the local, national, and global scale, because that's what we talk about on Get Secure. Again, I'm your host, Mike Blangiforti, Vice President of Marketing and Public Relations for Our Security. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next week at 4. Okay. Get Arrow.
Doesn't want to sit recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
We're
guys.
good?
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
For our security banner, because
I stopped.
you guys want to